It's been 8 years since the Switch was launched, and we all know that it had plenty of little hiccups or terribly optimized games, but as someone who had to travel for different reasons, I always appreciated this console, and that is the reason why I got plenty of games for this system, which I don't regret one bit. But now with the Switch 2 seems like some games have little improvements while playing on it, sometimes way better results, but it is true that sometimes they don't even start. Whatever the case, this is a list of 10 RPGs I would like to revisit on the Switch 2, precisely because of those hiccups, or to check if they even run. Just consider that I won't dive into gameplay mechanics, but more like those technical issues or visual details. If you're interested to know more, you can check the review playlist. There you will be able to find every single game I am going to talk about. Without further ado, in no particular order, let's begin. The first entry that came to my mind was Odyssey. I have talked about this game a couple of times. It is a strategic RPG with roguelike elements, where we follow Red Mother and Memory. Let's say gods that have to protect what's left of the Veil, as Mother wasn't able to stop the child's suffering. For those who don't know the game, I know it can be like, what? Yes, it is a convoluted story that requires some time to digest, plus having to read multiple notes. Now, this is a strategic game I really liked, but as I shared in its review time ago, unfortunately on the Switch it has plenty of little issues. Perhaps the most stressful is about getting close, and as it is a roguelike game, sometimes you may wonder if all your progress is going to die or if it is just a prank. A cool thing I would like to check if it improves, it's about some environmental details. Here you will see a constant rain all over the place, some highlights, little textures on the ground and stuff like that. Visually, this game it's quite interesting, perhaps a bit gloomy, but interesting nonetheless. Another game I would like to give it a try is Trails Through Daybreak. Here we follow Van and Agnes, while looking for some artifacts that are able to alter the reality in different ways. As we proceed we will find some of those artifacts and likable companions who join the cause. However, along the journey the beginning of each chapter is quite slow. And if you are into the Trails games, you will notice that some interactions make no real sense. Or at least, within the context of this story, it felt like, meh, I want that character here and that's it. In any case, it is a good tale. Now, the main reason why I would like to check this game once again, it's because on the Switch there were hiccups with textures, tending to load quite slow. I mean, this game is actually good looking on other systems, but of course the Switch has little issues here and there. Another thing I would like to check are loading screens, because sometimes they were kinda slow, taking up to 1 minute. Fortunately, there were no big problems with it getting close or similar things. So, if it is able to run slightly better, it is all good. The third game I would like to check is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. This is a well-known entry, so in summary we follow Noah, Uni and Lance, soldiers from Keves, who fight against Agnus. In one of many operations, unknown ships fly nearby some camps, so multiple confrontations began between this unknown faction and a fourth party that our protagonist had no idea about. The deal is that after an incident, Noah and Mio are able to fuse together, having the chance to fight Moebius back, but after this incident, Noah's group start to be persecuted as outlaws, as they got separated from this system that cycles between life and death. Unfortunately, this game had more issues. Perhaps the worst one is that it closed once while playing. Unfortunately, it autosaves, but yeah, it isn't the best of experiences. Now, I don't really expect a big change in this entry for at least 1/3 of the game, until reaching the part of the ocean. Here is where I notice most of problems, having drops all over the place and troubles loading textures. As for encounters, when battles got quite convoluted, filled with animations left and right, there were dips every now and then. Fortunately, you don't have to be super precise like in an action game, but having a much more constant frame rate would do wonders. Aside from these details, I will say that it was a really good experience, but one that could have been better on this end. In the next entry, Dead End Request 2. Here we follow May, character who had to live with an abusive father who had a problem with the number of drinks, where in one occasion, things escalated to a point of no return. Ironically, after this event May is sent to an academy where her little sister was also enrolled, but as time passed, she stopped communicating, so once May arrives to this place, she starts to find that there's plenty of weird things going on. I have a divided opinion about this tale, because the first half is really boring, falling under a lot of idle chatter that doesn't really add to the story. But once reaching the second half, it is like, wait a second, this is getting out of hand. Yep, the tale turns really good. The deal with this game is that it was more than obvious that textures and stuff like that weren't that good. For example here, it is really easy to see how the ambience looks kinda off. The thing is that through the whole game these were persistent issues that at the end of the day diminish the experience. To me, it isn't a deal breaker, but I mean I appreciate it if they don't have them. So that end would have benefited greatly if these dips weren't so noticeable. I know I may be asking too much, but who knows, maybe it improves a lot or maybe it doesn't even start. In the 5th entry, I would like to throw Room Factory 5. I know I have thrashed this game plenty of times, but what can I say? Here we follow a character with amnesia who happens to be an Earthmate, and from here he's going to work for a group named Sid, helping people out and saving the day. This is a light-hearted story, where the cheese flows all over the place, even the writers thought about it almost at the end. Now, as it was my experience on the Switch, yeah, I believe it is a bad game, and I attribute this feeling to the multiple issues it has. I know I'm stretching the rope way too much here, but if it is possible to improve the flow of the game to do something more decent, maybe I would have liked it a bit more. Considering that the enjoyable mechanics are there. I know I say oftentimes that I don't really care about the graphics, but this thing has drops everywhere, and after a while it feels like you're beating yourself with a stick. Also, it would be cool if this feeling like the game is going to freeze and die improved. I mean, oftentimes going outdoors was kinda stressful, like oh good lord. Next, I would like to try Is 9, Monstrum Nodes. This is another adventure, where Adol the Red gets engulfed in a crusade the moment he tried to enter into Balduk, the prison city. He got apprehended because he was suspect of past events, with good and ironic reasons, but once inside and more or less after having the chance to escape, he gets shot by a girl. This brings the most emo look of our hero, plus some cool powers with it. What's interesting about this story are the future events once you start to get what happens in this place, and the whole conflict. This is another really good story worth checking out. As for the issues, yeah, I would say that this engine wasn't particularly the best, and on the Switch it had plenty of issues, particularly in areas with multiple details or convoluted fights. At least it never closed. But yeah, in a game where you need to time inputs quite precisely, it can turn into an issue if you get caught in one of those hiccups. And it is more than obvious that the Switch was more or less able to follow what was going on. In other words, if it runs better on the Switch too, that would be cool. I mean, considering that this thing has to run like good butter on bread. Some weeks ago I talked about Phantom Brave, the Lost Hero, where we follow Ash and Marona. The thing here is that they got into an impossible fight against an army of phantoms, where Marona got captured and part of her powers were taken by this new antagonist. Fortunately, Ash was able to act quickly and get her off the ship. Once on shore, she is helped by a phantom named Apricot, and this is pretty much how this tale begins. Yep, I also believe it was a good story. Unfortunately, this game has way too many problems, and I know that for some it was a surprise that I gave this entry a really low score on the graphics department. But yeah, it closed way too many times. It takes a lot of time to load the screens. The music can go silent while getting into the Switch menu. While moving in a map it feels kinda janky and uncomfortable, particularly if you try to move while holding the area of effect of an attack. And I consider that a big issue, as sometimes you need to jump on some rocks to get a better position. And yeah, the list of details could go on and on. I know this might be another long shot, but let's say that if the number of problems could be reduced in something like 30%, that would be good. Considering that in all honesty, this is a game worth checking out. But man, it has way too many optimization problems. You know, I'm a big fan of first-person dungeon crawlers. And here I was thinking like, which one had the most problems, or which one I'd like to see in all its glory. So after thinking this for several hours, I would like to check Undernauts once again. This is a quite rich story, where a big structure suddenly appeared. Inside this place, it was possible to find materials to improve the current human technology, so plenty of groups start to enter this dungeon. However, in this case we follow a company that had no money to hire professionals on the matter, so women, kids, workers, whomever considered that had what it takes to become an undernaut was on board for a hellish adventure. The main reason why I would like to check this game once again, it's because some dungeons had something like different visual effects that I know perfectly well the Switch wasn't able to handle that well, particularly in some late areas. Now for an experiencing entry, I know they put a lot of effort here, as there are interesting details, and of course they improved the enemy sprites and movement, at least in comparison with previous entries. So in the end I chose Undernauts, because I really liked what this game had to offer, but it is also true that there were some ugly areas. Let's continue with Dragon Star Varnir. Here we follow Sephi, soldier who was hunting witches, but in the process he gets caught in a battle against a dragon. We could say that he pretty much kicked the bucket, but two witches decided to give him dragon blood, which only works on witches, and yeah, in an unexpected turn of events they find out he's a witch too, if that makes sense. Well, the deal is that he isn't able to come back with his comrades, and these witches don't particularly trust him. What's cool is that depending from your actions, this adventure can take a quite nightmarish turn, or you may have to fight higher beings. Another recommended story. This game had plenty of issues. The biggest of them most likely will be persistent even on the Switch too. I guess it is more like an optimization problem or something like that, because if the background disappears, the following area doesn't load, or the game thinks that you never finished the previous chapter. Now, I don't know the root cause, but if it magically fixes itself because of extra resources, I mean, that would be amazing. It's worth mentioning that it is easy to work around this problem, but I gotta be honest, the first time it happened to me I was like, what the heck happened? What do I need to do? And you had me running in circles for several hours until I checked that it was an issue. There are other problems, but they never really bothered me. I mean, comparing these of course. But if it slightly improves textures, loading screens, and some animations that sometimes have little drops, that would be the cherry on top. In any case, if you have the Switch version, just save before every boss encounter, and do not resave until you see that the next area loads without issues. And last but not least, Unicorn Overlord. This story begins with Joseph and Queen Elenia talking about escaping, as this kingdom is pretty much crumbling. But the queen doesn't precisely agree and stays back to fight his Manos, Balmor. Confrontation that at all lights was a bad idea, but still, while all of this happened, Joseph took Elaine and ran into another region. 10 years later the enemy reaches the coast of this place, so Elaine's group gets cornered to act. In terms of the story, I liked what happened in this game, but maybe its gameplay was too addictive for me, to a point where I forgot about its story for perhaps a bit too much. On the Switch this entry has some drops in certain areas, particularly when there are some environmental effects like blizzards or rains. On top of this, add multiple units moving all over the place and it starts to feel a bit awkward. To be fair, in this game it isn't that big of a deal, but considering that it has really good visuals, I would have liked to see some interactions flow a bit better. And in some battles it was possible to notice little drops. Of course, battles where there were multiple things on a screen. Aside from minor details, I believe it ran good enough, but once again, going for a smoother experience is always well and good. But now let me ask you, if you had the chance to play other 10 RPGs on the Switch too, which ones would be? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.